Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Anil Makar and welcome to the second edition of Speak Easy Dental. Speak Easy Dental is a podcast in which we get to know an individual really well on the basis of what they've done in the dental community and also, open up a little bit about dentistry itself. And it's a real honor and pleasure of having this gentleman on the podcast. This is my second edition, so I'm kind of privileged to have him here. And I just want to talk just a few minutes about Tim because I know I really want to dive into a lot of topics with him, and I only want to take about 30 minutes of his time because I know his time is extremely valuable. Tim is the founder and CEO of ROI Corp Management, okay? And basically, he's a master at dental consulting, looking at appraising practices, buying and selling practices. But one of the greatest gifts I find Tim has, looking at a lot of his websites and a lot of, the guests that he's been on podcasts, is his ability to look into the landscape of dentistry and the future of dentistry. And that's what I'm really excited to talk to him about. He's got a great story. I don't really want to get too involved in that story because I want to spend Tim's time talking about certain topics, but I suggest that everybody, if you want to hear the story about how Tim started, go to the website, roicorp.com, hit About Story, and you won't be disappointed. It's absolutely a great story. So Tim, thank you for being on the podcast. Before we start, I just want to talk a little bit about you, okay? I know you're not a dentist, and I know, can you just give me an idea of what school did you attend to to become a person that's learned business and learned the ins and outs? I know you got a lot of knowledge from your father, and which is really good. That's a one-on-one knowledge, but just give me a little background about your educational history.
Oh, no, thanks, first of all, for having me on Speak Easy Dentistry. And I want to talk, Speak Easy Dental, I want to talk about something you said a little earlier, because you called us ROI Corporation Management. So my dad first started the company in 1974, and he called it ROI Management. And then in 1983, that's about 40 years ago now, 41 years ago, he changed the name to ROI Corporation. So you've just aged yourself there by calling us ROI Management because we changed the name 41 years ago. But the large majority of our clients are more mature people of the profession. We still get checks because a lot of our older clients don't want to use a Visa card. They want to pay by paper check, payable to ROI Management 41 years later. So I made sure that I kept that name active so I could cash the checks. So that speaks a little bit about our history. It speaks a little bit about your age and my age. So thanks for having me on Speak Easy Dental. To your first question, I'm a community college graduate. I went to Sir Sanford Fleming College for 3 years in Peterborough, Ontario, Canada. I took a 3-year marketing and business program. That's the point. At that point in time, I had no idea that I enjoyed public speaking. And that's where I was able to get on a stage and give speeches to my class and then to larger classes. And then the professors recognized that, hey, the kids kind of got the gift of the gab, and they would put me up in front of the large lecture halls. And, I started public speaking and delivering, as a practice professor. One of my professors in particular let me speak. So my education was really, high school in Lorne Park in South Mississauga in Ontario, and then community college after that. And during that period, I obtained a license under the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act here in Ontario, and that was in '84. And then they just renamed that here in Ontario, now called the Trust and Real Estate Services Act. Folks, I see the sun's just starting to come over the roof of my house, so I'll have to sneak in a bit. And that's about it. I've taken a lot of other courses. I'm a fellow of the Real Estate Institute of Canada. I've hosted and been part of implant courses where I was the organizer, the coordinator. I sat through those implant courses as a layperson. I've sat through multitudes of lectures when I've traveled with University of Toronto, for example, on cruises. I sponsor some of their events in like Aruba and Curacao, and I sit through the lectures. I listen to the topic, subject matter, whatever it is. I did 8 hours of radiology on a cruise ship about 10 years ago. So I've always hung around these lectures. So I consider that part of my education, even though I'm not able to obtain CE points for the clinical programs I've sat through. I find it fascinating. And I think it gives me a little more of an inside view as to what it is that you and your colleagues actually go through every day. So that's my education in a nutshell. Thanks for asking, Anna.
I just want to ask you, I'm going to take you way back here, okay? And you're going to know the answer to this question. When was the first time that you walked in and saw a dental office and said, this is different? Okay. And basically, I'm sure you were with your father at that time, practically. But the first time you appraised an office, what was the first thing that hit you about a dental office, as far as like, how are we going to sell this thing, you know?
So throughout my childhood, I was a dental phobe. My dad's best friend was a dentist. My dad designed and built his best friend's dental office back in the 60s. And all through the 60s, I was born in 63, and right into the early 70s, I was a dental phobe. I screamed, I yelled, I probably needed to be tied down. So I didn't really connect with the dental office environment until I was 14 years of age. And that's when my father says, Tim, I have a big file out in Calgary. And one of my best friends from high school, his family had recently moved to Calgary. So my dad said, why don't you come with me? I'll put you on the plane with me. You can help me do this dental practice appraisal. I'll teach you a few things, and you can see your friend Howie while you're in Calgary. So, of course, I said yes. And I signed up right away. And that's when I walked into a dental office, and I was officially working for my first time with my dad. And he sat down and he taught me how to take the inventory. He didn't involve me in the financial statements or some of the more complex part of the appraisal. He said, I'm going to teach you how to make a list. One, Pelton and Crane, Chairman, model PCM 2000. The x-rays, the delivery systems, listing hand pieces, taking photographs, recording serial numbers and model numbers. And that's when I realized that this is actually quite serious what my father does. This is important to take this inventory, because my dad explained to me that this is for insurance, this is for bank financing. If this dentist ever wants to sell, the buyer and his team want to know exactly what's there, how old is it, what condition is it in. And that's when it registered to me at the age of 14. I said, this is very serious. And I hadn't really connected to the severity of what my father was doing until that time. Thanks for asking, Neil. 14. That's when the light went
Wow.
on for me.
Wow. In 1989, I graduated from Dalhousie Dental School, and of course, you're looking for a job in Halifax. And I was walking through this mall, and I saw an office called Tridon.
Yep.
Okay. And I said to myself, wow, we can't market, we can't advertise. It's against, our rules of the dental board. But whoever owns and figured out this concept, I want to talk to this guy because he basically found a loophole, okay? Which was a mall, where people high traffic and all that stuff, right? And it just gives me goosebumps right now, actually thinking about it, because I love that kind of stuff, where dentists can actually figure out a loophole from all the restrictions that we have. And of course, I know this gentleman really well, and all I've seen on is podcasts that he's done, and is Howie Rocket, Dr. Howie Rocket. Okay, I had a question for you for him, but I just want to know the answer about this. Is that today we have like DSOs, and what DSOs are going, they're acquiring dental practices from dentists. Did Howie basically start all his practices from scratch, or did he also acquire practices?
So in the beginning, he and his partner, Brian Price, they had a very small practice at Dundas and Dixie in kind of central Mississauga. I believe they started that from scratch. I don't know whether they acquired or not. I don't know the answer to that. Howie and I are still friends. He just texted me the other day, and he was one of my mentors. He hired me. I worked there in the late 80s, like kind of the beginning of the end of that whole dental DSO is basically what it was. Then what they decided to do very early in their business plan was that they had connections with, particularly it started with Cadillac Fairview. And Cadillac Fairview had some very large malls in Canada, large enclosed malls, much like the one you went through in Halifax. And because of that connection, they approached them and said, we'd like to put a dental office right in the main mall, in the retail level. And Cadillac said, well, we've never done that before. They said, well, we think we can make a go of it, because it would appear as though the traditional element of the dental profession is not offering extended hours. There's no evenings and weekends. It's a 9 to 5 profession. Wednesdays and afternoons off for golf. That was the stigma of the old school dental delivery system. I shouldn't call it a stigma. That was the reality of it. So Cadillac said, okay, let's do it. I forget which was their very first location, but they ended up with 107 dental practices in large enclosed malls. Just about every Cadillac Fairview mall they had. And then they went to other large landlords that had large malls. So it was always a start from scratch business model, Anil. They never bought, they never acquired, they never accumulated patients, they never bought used dental equipment. It was a fresh build from ground up, fresh leaseholds, all Belmont dental equipment. Their whole franchise was built around the Belmont dental equipment line. They had one cabinet company that made all the cabinets nationwide, and they would ship them and install them. They were a unified, systematized franchise system. And it was very compartmentalized. They had the same everything, same charts, same typewriters probably at the time in the beginning, same phone systems. That's what made it easy for them to expand. And it was very scalable because everything was identical right from the first. And I'm sure they made some changes along the way and decided, let's go with that handpiece instead of that. But generally speaking, it was a 100% unified systematized business system. So I just have to adjust because the sun's coming over my house. Give me a minute.
Yep.
There's a shiner right on the top of my head. So I think that's what made it easy for them. Now, in comparison to the current accumulators, I think I have a little bronchitis. Forgive me, folks.
Okay.
The current accumulators are buying all individual practices. So if you buy 2 or 3 or 400 practices, and your practice was sold to a corporate, which was then merged with another corporate, but can you imagine the challenge of buying 300 practices from a Neil McCarr, 300 different McCarrs? You're different than that guy, than this woman, than that partnership. And you all have a different delivery system, a different style, different fees, different beliefs, different equipment, different software, different everything. I think it's a tremendous challenge for the current DSOs to accumulate 3 or 4 or 500 individual personalities, styles, and systems, and try somehow to merge it into a unified reporting system. Now, they're doing it. I'm not saying they're failing at it, but I just can't imagine the administrative and bureaucratic and the administrivia costs and systems of trying to get everybody to more or less drink the same Kool-Aid. So Trident did well because it was unified, and hopefully I didn't go too far off topic, but how's that?
Well, your last point's really valid about DSOs is administrative work, right? Sometimes I find that and speaking from experience too, sometimes I find the administrative work can slow the growth down of a practice. So focused on doing the administrative work instead of going right to, hey, we just bought this practice, how are we gonna grow it? What leaders do we have at this practice? Where do we have it defined here? But instead, they're going through all the data constantly. Okay, so with me, I'm a little reverse. Now, with Howie Rocket, I gotta tell you something, he was a visionary, okay? And in your mind today, do we have any visionaries like Howie Rocket in the dental field?
At the time, retail and extended hours was pioneering in dentistry, and it was extensively resisted by the traditional elements of the profession. Advertising was unheard of. You may recall, some of you may recall, and if you don't, here's a funny story. So back in the 80s, a dentist was allowed to advertise in a newspaper, by example, because newspapers were a very powerful advertising medium. They could only put in a business size card advertisement. You couldn't take a half a page or a quarter page. Yellow pages were not even permitted at the time, and they're all come and gone by now. So what Howie Rocket was, he took a full page in the Toronto Star and published, I think it was 48 individual business cards all together on one single page. And he said, well, you said I could advertise a business card, so I put Dr. McCarr's business card, Dr. Brown's business card, Dr. Smith's business card, but he put them all on one page. So the Royal College of Dental Surgeons of Ontario flipped a wig. They lost their cool on it, and they went after them. And then Howie and Brian, the two owners and pioneers of Trident, they escalated it all the way up, and they won. And they broke the barrier of the right for dentists to advertise by going to the Supreme Court. I think it wasn't Canada, it was the Supreme Court of Ontario. And that's a Google case, folks. Trident, TRIDONT, advertising, Royal College. I haven't searched it in years, but I'm sure it's still there. So they broke the barrier. So that was pioneering in that they went retail, malls, they went evenings, they went weekends, they started advertising. And after that, the floodgates open and people were on park benches and flyers and, the hot air balloons and yellow pages, you name it, it all happened. So that's what they did that was pioneering. Today, I don't see anything that's pioneering. I see private equity accumulating businesses for profit. That's not necessarily new, but there's nothing pioneering about that. Private equities buying pharmacies, optometry, veterinary, dental. In the States, private equities bought up more than half of the healthcare delivery system. And there's a number of articles about how private equity buys healthcare. And I'm sorry, folks, but they do gut them out. They're there for the money. They're not there for the delivery system. They're not there. They try to be efficient. I mean, what business doesn't try to perfect efficiencies? Absolutely. But it's not always a growth model. It's an accumulate and profit model. So that is a criticism of the present dental service organizations. There's two leaders out there, Graham Rosenberg being one and Dr. Amin Shivji being the other. And I'm sure you should interview them both and they will have their own comments on this. But I have been on panels with both of them. I've met them both in person a number of occasions. I disagree with some of their business model delivery systems, but they're there and they're working. Between them, they own about 1,000 practices, those
Mhm.
two DSOs, and there's probably approaching 16,000 dental practices in Canada today. So they're at just those two companies alone are probably a 6 or 7% market share, give or take.
I saw an interview with you with Howie. It's an old one on YouTube, and you asked Howie a question about how they managed, like what's it take to open up a dental office, and what was one of the challenges. And I like what he said, and it's still a problem today, and
Mm.
that was keeping human resources happy.
Yeah, culture.
The culture, okay. Um, in today's world, we hear about shortage of dental assistants. We hear shortage of dental hygienists, right? I myself, I don't believe there's a shortage. I just believe that these people are looking for something, as Howie says, that's going to make them happy. Okay, so I want to know your thoughts on that because people are always saying, no, it's all about money. They want more money, more wages. But I kind of like you, like I strongly believe in culture, right? And creating a good culture. I mean, before I sold my office in 2015 to a corporation, we had a lot of culture in our office, and I never lost one staff, hardly at all. Okay, and then when I moved to selling to corporate, first, I sold to Ultimate Dental at that time, and Sven and George, they're awesome CEOs. They also try to create that family thing, but in the back of the mind of the employees, they're saying it's a corporate office, right? So are we creating culture for the corporate office, or are we creating culture for this particular practice? Like, can you give just a little view on like what you think about that?
Well, I'll jump back to the Trident phenomenon. So I was Howie's personal assistant for about a year.
Okay.
He had me running numbers. He had me running spreadsheets. He had me running around, taking meetings. He got to spread a little too thin. And that was part of the problem with this growth model is once you get beyond 20, 30, or 40 practices, there's only so much of the charismatic leader to go around. He or she can only be in touch with so many people. They can only visit so many locations. So they start getting further removed. And this happens in all organizations. The bigger they get, the higher up the CEO goes. Now, let's take Elon Musk, for example. I saw an interview the other day. He works 100 hours a week. He's the first one in the factory and the last one to leave. Apparently, he's taking medication to be able to stay awake that long. But you can't do that. You will die. You will burn out. You will get too thin. And you'll only be able to give 60 seconds to each person instead of 60 minutes. So when Trident grew, Howard Rocket was the most charismatic leader of that. And I watched him. He was with people. He was always around. He was up early. He was exercising at 5 a.m. He was in a suit and in his office and ready to take meetings at 6 a.m. I never beat him into the office. And I was young and I was ready to go. And I couldn't beat that man into the office. And he'd stay late. He'd have meetings at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. He was invested. He eventually had a stroke and as today is still recovering from it. And he's doing extremely well under the circumstances. But I think he overinvested himself. And he got spread too thin, but he tried to cover all the bases. So when any organization grows, the leaders who started it and accumulated it, they get further and further removed from the people, the boots on the ground, the
Yeah.
people in the business, your assistants, your hygienists, even you to some extent. George and Sven at Ultima could only give you so much time. And geographically, you were 3 hour flight away from them.
Yep.
And now the owners of your organization, they're out on the West Coast. I know they have regional manners and they have big meetings and Zooms and everything, but the humanity, the face-to-face between the staff and the owner, it isn't
Yeah.
there anymore.
Yeah.
You're
Absolutely.
their leader. You're
Yeah.
still there. And I know that your staff sees you as the ongoing leader because you are, and you're a charismatic guy and you're invested and you care, but you're not the boss.
Correct.
They know that. So
Yeah.
they know who signs their paycheck. They know the reports they have to fill, and they know they're going someplace else. You may or may not be asked to look at them and review them. So it's just that disconnect. Think of all the people that work in at Tim Hortons. They know they're working for a franchise owner, but in many cases, don't even know who that is. Okay.
Yeah.
Franchise owners don't even show up. They don't identify themselves. It's a numbered company in some cases. Same with McDonald's and other franchises. And they know that head office is somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's who really calls the shot on the coffee formula and whether it's going to be a pizza service that they sell or ham on a bun or whatever the next food product is. They're really just line people working for a system, a numerical, corporately run, systematized, corporatized, marketized system. And I think in the history, I'll just wrap up with traditionally dentistry was one owner, one dentist, their staff, their patients, Christmases, lunches, vacations, CE together. It was a very, very unified delivery system. And
Absolutely.
corporatization just puts another layer between that, if not more than one layer. And I think that the boots on the ground, being the assistant staff and reception and hygiene, I think they feel a little removed from the leader now.
Great points, and points that I actually agree with. Let's dive into dentistry a little bit. What do you think is the landscape of the new grad setting up a new office or buying an existing one? What's the feel out there in the Canadian market with graduates from dental school?
Well, let's use the large cities for a minute.
Mhm.
So I live in South Mississauga. This is the Credit River Valley behind me. For anyone that knows where Port Credit in South Mississauga is, um, I went to Orangeville yesterday, 2 days ago, to give a short talk to it's called the Headwaters Dental Society, because there's a lot of rivers up there, and that's a component society of the Ontario Dental Association. So they invited me up for a dinner, and I got to give a talk. I drove Mississauga Road because I live on Mississauga Road here in South Mississauga, and I knew it would take twice as long as taking the highways, but I was ahead of schedule. I thought, it's early fall. What a nice day for a drive. I hadn't done that in quite a few years, by the way. Oh my goodness, the new development, the housing, the plazas, and the dental offices. Dental, dental, dental. I almost got in an accident trying to count them all at one intersection because there was one on all four corners. All brand new plazas, all have a bank, all have fast food, shawarma, you name it. It's the same usual mall configuration. This is happening all over Canada. For a new graduate today to have set up any one of those practices, I think it's going to be a very long haul to make break even. There's not enough, even all that new housing is there. But remember, those people came from someplace else. It might not be that far away. They may have another dentist someplace else that they can still commute to. They don't all switch dentists just because they move residences. So I've heard people drive hours to go back to their family dentist. That's loyalty. So I think that the new graduate, for a setup, if that's the question, if I understood it correctly, it's very dim. It's very dismal. Reaching break even is 3 to 5 years. Your minimum $750,000 to open a dental office today, probably closer to $1 million, because you have 3 or 4 rooms, you have a pan, you have digital, you have technology. So I think that if you, I'll just be very blunt. If you want to set up a brand new practice, doctor, no student debt, not married yet, no kids, probably living at home with mom and dad, maybe you got a car lease and an Apple iPhone, and that's all you need. If you've got no debt, no mortgage, no family, no in-laws, no outlaws living with you, go set up a practice. It'll be a long haul, but you can do it. For the large majority of people that graduate, they have student loans. Many of them are married, or they have families, quickly arriving, other family members that are relying on them. You just need to buy a practice. As old as the equipment may be, and as outdated as some of the business systems may be, you need patience, you need bums and seats, and you need cash flow. Setting up is a very, very, very serious decision to make today. And I would caution lots of new grads to really budget that very carefully.
I agree 100%. So back in 2013, obviously, corporate dentistry, we experienced Dental Corp, right? And obviously now in British Columbia, as you said, 1, 2, 3 dentists.
Yep.
So I know Dental Corp really took their model from Australia and kind of adapted a little bit more to the Canadian market. Okay. And corporate dentistry first came out. There's a lot of resistance from dentists because obviously they don't understand it. They don't understand how it works. Obviously, that's my opinion anyways. Okay. But as we move along now, okay, with corporate dentistry, what is your opinion on corporate dentistry with respect to dental care in Canada?
Well, I've read the websites of all of the corporate dental delivery systems, and there's more than 2 in Canada. There's a number of them that are branded. And
But those are 2 big ones, sorry.
Yeah, and everybody has a value proposition, mostly for the dentist. They're all trying to attract dentists because they want you to join the club and bring your practice in. So most of their public-facing messaging, it's not even public, it's mostly profession-facing messaging. They're trying to attract you, Anil, and your colleagues to come join the club.
Yeah.
So that's mostly what I see, because that's mostly what exists. On the public-facing side, what the public can see by visiting a website, it's pretty much like all the other dental websites. We're here for you. We care. We offer these services. It's very sanitized, because that's pretty much all dentistry can say about what they can do for people. Then I think, this is a question for your colleagues more so than me, because I don't work in practice. I've spoken to many, many dentists about their experience working either solo, individually, partnership, associate, or working in a corporate phenomenon. is I've heard many say, what is the corporate doing for Canadians? What is the delivery value proposition you have for Canadians other than we're open and we just still deliver the same dental care that Dr. McCarr always delivered? I mean, what's new for the public is my question.
Mhm.
And many of these corporates don't have a public facing advertising looking for new business that I've seen. I don't see them on radios or television or newspapers or in the public domain saying, come to our dental clinic, ABC 123, DSO, DDC. I don't care what they call themselves. I don't really see them advertising to me. I've never received any marketing, and I have multiple residences in Canada. I've never seen anything saying, come to our clinic. Now, maybe I've missed it. And a lot of these clinics, they're not rebranded by the corporate. So even though they may be marketing me, I don't even know who owns a lot of those clinics. I drive by dental offices every time I commute, and I don't know who owns them. I can look it up and probably figure it out because I have the data, but I don't bother doing that. So I don't know what any corporate phenomenon that we see today, what is your value proposition for the public? And I think you need to ask them that question, not me. And you work in it, so maybe you have the answer, but I'm just not seeing it. I'm seeing what they're trying to do to attract you and your colleagues to join their club and come into the fold. I see a lot of that. I get a lot of questions and conversations about that. So maybe I'm oblivious to the public value proposition, but I don't get it. I mean,
Mhm.
don't know what
Yeah,
they're doing. So ask somebody better informed is my suggestion. Thanks.
well, let's talk about that for a second because I've been involved for about 9 years in this. Is that I find it's a cookie cutter for the patients. They each have their own marketing department, okay? But patients in BC are different from patients in Atlantic Canada. But you still have your own cookie cutter marketing for everything. So basically, you're creating the same demographic across Canada, right? So I feel that the marketing's got to be more specific for the demographic in the area for patients like yourself, okay? That's one big thing that I've noticed, okay? The second thing, you're right, patients don't know because we still keep the same name. Like we don't go under the corporate name, we go under the name we always had, right? So they
Right.
identify us as that, okay? And with respect to dental care, it's the brand of the doctor that's providing the dental care. It doesn't matter if you're corporate or not. Like, and you just mentioned it, it's the dentist that provides the health care, the oral care. It's their reputation at stake, obviously, for doing that, right? But as you said, with respect to marketing, I think it's got to be more individualized with the uniqueness of every practice that they purchased, right?
Uh, I would totally agree. I mean, demographics is not rocket science. It's been talked about
Yeah.
for years. I call it dentographics. Let's study the dental market. And if you and I were in Nova Scotia, I would tell you that our marketing Tatamagouche is going to be distinctly different than Dartmouth, than Truro, than Halifax, because they're different demographics. They're
Yeah.
different peoples, different behaviors, different dental IQs, different incomes, different housing affordability, different everything, family structures,
Mhm.
expectations, particularly dental IQ. And dental IQ is just a measurement of the patient's ability to understand, comprehend, and receive and accept, treatment planning. So, I really think I always use Tatamagouche as an example because I've been there many times. One of my associates, Dr. Jeff
Yeah.
Williams, lived
Yeah.
there. That's different. So to take Vancouver and market the same to Calgary, don't do that. To take Toronto and market the same to Montreal, don't do that. To take St. John's and market the same to St. John, those are different cities, folks. Get them straight. One has an S, one doesn't. There's a difference. Know them.
Yeah.
So, I really think that global corporate marketing like Coca-Cola and McDonald's, even those companies know it's a little different in South America than it is in Russia, than it is in Canada. I don't know how the corporate dental organizations are doing it. I just don't see, or I'm not finding their public-facing marketing efforts to the Canadian public. It may be there, but I'm oblivious to it, so I should probably just stop.
It's
I really, you need to interview them. What are your
yeah.
objectives for the
It's
Canadian
it's
public?
good to get your point of view because, like you said, you're not a dentist, so I appreciate that. And then, I like to get a patient's point of view on certain things also, right? Helps me learn. Let's move along here. So, what are your views on the Canadian Dental Care Plan, and do you, in the sense like, what do you just think about it? Do you think it's a great thing for dentists, or I'm going to stop. I just want you to know. I just want to hear you out on this. See
All
what you
right.
think.
Well, I've been following you for a while, and I agree with you. I think that CDCP is good for the Canadians. And I'm going to speak about the public right now. There are many, many people in Canada who had barriers to entry to cross the threshold of a dental office. Some is just plain old-fashioned dental anxiety and phobias. Your profession's been dealing with that forever. Some are financial barriers. Some are misunderstandings. Some are insurance misunderstandings and insurance barriers. So now we have an element, a huge element of the Canadian population that is now learning more about their ability to consume dental care, and they have an affordability factor now. They have an assistance plan. And regardless of the fees and the insurance and all of those other political topics that your profession has bantered about for quite some time, I hear the federal government in its present budget is planning to spend about $5 billion on dental care for Canadians that didn't exist in the dental revenue system previous to this. Now, some would argue that, yeah, but some of these people already had insurance. They're just using a different insurance now, perhaps. So let's take a billion or two off the top. But it's still 2, 3, 4 billion in new revenue to the Canadian dental profession from people who did not cross the threshold of a dental office for a long time, other than perhaps emergencies. And many of them ended up in the hospitals because they didn't understand dental delivery at the private level. So I think it's good for Canadians. And I want to speak to Canadians and the fact that I know some seniors who've said to me, what do you think? I said, sign up, find a dental office that takes it, get your butt in there and get looked after.
Yeah.
Get some care. You're in trouble. You have very serious problems. I can't help you. I can have a quick look and go, oh my gosh, most people can do that. You don't need Dr. Google can do that for you. So I persuaded a number of people to register because they qualify, and they've gone and got, much, much better dental care than they've ever received. So they're happier and they're better off and they have better oral health. How can that fail, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah.
How can that be wrong? Now, I understand the other side of it, which is the whole argument about it's going to diminish the value of our practices. We're all going to start working for the government. It's going to be the same thing as what happened to Medicare, and here in Ontario, we have OHIP. Let's not have that conversation today. It's too early to tell, ladies and gentlemen. I say to every dentist that asks, and I did it the other night at the ODA meeting, I said, take it, doctor. Take the people. They're at your door. It's a pretty decent fee guide from what I understand. You are allowed to accept copay or balance bill, whatever language you want to use. Help people. You're in health care, so help people. You can always stop taking it. And there are many other social programs in Canada that have been around for decades that some dentists have just decided, as a basis of experience, I don't want to accept that insurance anymore. And many dentists have that right. No one can force you, other than your ethics and your jurisprudence of perhaps helping people. No one can force you to take any insurance plan. That's what non-assignment is. Non-assignment dental practice is we don't accept insurance. You'll get your check from your insurance company when they're darn good and ready to reimburse you. This is a fee for service practice. That's it.
See, this is the part where really mystifies me. I mean, I was talking to a dentist the other day, and he's marketing dental implants in Invisalign. He's spending about $10,000 a month marketing those two products, right? He's not on the CDCP. And I was saying, like, why are you spending so much money on this kind of stuff when you could get free marketing and get patients that are going to pay you within 24 to 48 hours?
Sunlife.ca, folks. Find a dentist.
Right.
There are dentists getting volumes of new patient input, and they may have low dental IQ, they may have low income, they might have phobias. There could be all kinds of challenges with some of these incoming patients. But I can guarantee you one thing: the insurance program isn't that bad from what I hear, and they need a lot of work. They need help. So how can a dental practice go wrong with that? But this is a hot potato. It's the hottest potato in the industry. I'm going to throw it back to you and say, you need to talk to more dentists that either are refusing to take it or dentists that are taking it, like yourself, Anil, and let the profession decide. That's my suggestion. That's my observation.
So this next question is kind of controversial, but I got to get it out because it always, like, I said, if I got to talk to somebody about this, it's got to be Tim. Okay. As dentists, okay, we have like dental supplies that we buy and stuff. We go to all these fancy meetings. The dentists support these meetings, let's face it, okay? At conventions and things like that. Now, we got corporate dentistry, okay? All these dental suppliers that corporate dentistry deals with, they give them a very low cost on their dental supplies, on their dental equipment, and etc. I understand why, because it's volume buying, okay? But that also tells me what the margins are of profitability in the dental supply company, okay? Why can't the dental supply company, I don't really care about like giving the best margin to the corporate guys, right? But like, why can't they give the individual owner of the dental
Mhm.
practice the same kind of like, just not the same discount, Tim, I don't know how to say it properly, right? But hey, we respect you guys. We supported you guys over the years, you know, and stuff. We built like Patterson, Henry Schein, and St. Clair, and all these guys and stuff. And we love the support back as far as
Yeah.
like the service that you've given us and stuff, right? But what about this? What about the single guy?
Okay.
Not corporate dentistry. Can you do something about that?
Just throw me another hot potato, why don't you? Full disclosure, my company is not affiliated, aligned, owned, marketized, no strategic alliances with any dental supply company in Canada whatsoever. We are 100% independent arm's length from everybody, the banks, the accounting, the legal, everybody. With one exception, I do own a company called Realty Lease Consultant. That's about premise leases. That's another day. So, and one of my chief competitors is owned by Henry Schein. Okay, and anybody can look that up in Canada. So, as to the cost of dental supplies, yes, corporates get volume buying. It's like McDonald's pays a lot less for coffee cups than Bob's coffee shop does. And everyone understands that. That's supply chain, that's volume buying. In defense of the dental supply companies, servicing the individual account is significantly more complicated than serving the corporate account because the corporate says we want 20,000 curettes. And the individual orders 10 and sends 2 back and says, oh, this one was bent. You know, there's just way more work in servicing smaller accounts than there is in larger accounts. Um, Receivables. A lot of suppliers will factor in, their ability to collect on all of the things that they sell. And I'm not just talking dental suppliers. I'm talking anybody,
Yeah.
staples, what have you. They're factoring in bad debts, late payers, slow payers. I don't know the arrangements they have with the big dental corporates, but I'm pretty sure they're pretty comfortable that they're going to get paid. So, they take that into account is we might not get paid to 45 or 60 days, but we're going to get $800,000 checks instead of 8,000 from Dr. Smith or Dr. Brown. So, there's costs in administering smaller accounts. There's more administration, returns, just the general nature of servicing that account. But I think that there's good margin in many industries, including dental supply. I should say that I do own shares publicly in Patterson Dental and Henry Schein. The Henry Schein shares lately have done extremely well, even though they own my direct competitor. Like, way to go. Great organization, Henry Schein, by the way. Your larger corporate vision and your culture. Check out the culture of Henry Schein corporate, folks. They've got it. That's why they're doing so well. I'm not saying Patterson doesn't have it, but I can tell you Henry Schein does. Um, and other than, publicly traded shares, which anybody can buy, I have no other affiliations. So, I think that the individual dentist always feels frustrated with dental supplies. My example has always been Dixie cups. You can go down to the local Walmart and get a case of little cups, the wax treated cups with little bunny rabbits on them or love hearts, whatever you want, for about half the price you can from your dental dealer. But you got to go get them. They're not always in stock. Maybe somebody bought and returned that case of Dixie cups. It's just that it's just easier to order
Yeah.
and it's more trustworthy. There's something to be said about trust and reliability. They know you, they have your account. If you just say, we need 6 more of those, 8 more of those repeat orders, they've got you. They generally don't make any mistakes there because it's a consistent repeat. Now, I'm not trying to support nor defend the dental suppliers, but I buy a lot of paper products and toner products. My photocopy charges are off the chart. My software costs are off the chart. I can only do so much as a small guy. I know that Remax probably buys a lot more of the same software as I buy, but they're paying a heck of a lot less than I am. I don't know what to say. I hope that
You know
helps.
what? Actually, that was a great hearing your perspective, by the way, because some things I never really thought about until you mentioned. So I do appreciate that, right?
Thanks.
Especially with accounts receivables and other things about knowing us as a dentist and maybe. When I used to own my practice, yes, I did send stuff back. I'll admit it. Okay, and stuff. So
Well,
good point.
sometimes you don't want it, and
Yeah.
sometimes they make a mistake. Come on, we're all
Uh, I
ready
just,
to
I,
go.
yeah, I just got just a couple more questions here. Technology. Okay. If you probably noticed, technology is really rapid in the dental industry right now.
Oh man.
Like, we got text reminders, we got AI coming down the road and stuff. When it first started out with digital x-rays, it's great. You're going to get your money back from that, digital x-rays, because I think digital x-rays is one of the greatest things that could ever happen to dentistry.
Oh yeah.
But when you look at AI and things like that to make a better diagnosis and, not having a receptionist and the AI is making the phone call and stuff like that. So I know they're trying to make it easier, okay? But do you feel that the monthly cost for having all this stuff is really going to be beneficial for the dental office, A, and number one, to train your staff on how to use this technology? Okay? Are we going forward, or are we going to leave things the way they are?
But no industry is going to resist the introduction of new technologies to change the way we do business. I was telling someone the other day, I'll never forget, I'm 60 now. I'm going to guess I was, say, 20, 40 years ago. And I remember the guy from Sharp called up on the landline. We didn't have cell phones. And he says, okay, everyone go stand near the facsimile machine. And we all went and we surrounded it. He goes, what do you want me to say? We said, say, hello, Tim, or whatever we said. And sure enough, this little piece of paper, we heard the buzzing and then the sound, and this little curly piece of thermal paper came out, and we held it up and it said, hello, Tim. And I went, oh my God, this is going to change everything. So I remember, that was a really big moment for me as a young man to see that they can send paper through the phone line. And I thought that was just amazing. So, and look at all the other developments since then, too many to list. So I remember when the first intraoral camera, I went into a dental practice and I said, what's that? I was taking the inventory, as my father taught me when I was a young boy. I said, what's that? He goes, well, that's an intraoral camera. I go, what? What does that do? He goes, well, let me show you. So he sat me down for a minute and he turned it on. He stuck this great big thing in my mouth and it took a picture of my tooth. Now, it wasn't live video streaming like it is today, and it wasn't digital imaging. It was just a camera on a wand that was able to fit into the oral cavity and took a picture. And it showed it on the screen. And then he had this little Polaroid printer and he printed it out. And he says, I send patients home with these photographs so they can look at what I'm trying to explain to them. It's all broken, it's bombed out, it's cracked, it's leaking, whatever. And I went, wow, that's cool. And he says, man, it's totally increased my treatment acceptance because now they can see what I'm saying. And I went, okay. So, and back then the early intraoral cameras were $20,000, $30,000. They were great big, they were bulky, they didn't work very well, but man, they changed things. And here we still have them today. I went for a scan the other day and it was just watching it on the screen because they're showing the patients. Most people using, the digital imaging are showing the patient as they progress. That's so cool, man. As a patient, I'm impressed. Your cost, yes, your software, you're going to be constantly upgrading this stuff, maybe the equipment, but mostly the software, the training of your staff. From a patient experience, that's really slick. I'm seeing what you're trying to tell me, doctor. And the problem with your profession is that you're working in the intraoral cavity and we can't. We're just hearing. And even then we're overstimulated. The assistant's talking sounds. We hear background noises in the office. Some of you got TVs going, like we're overstimulated in there. And some of us are in a little bit of fear and anxiety. We're not listening as you think we are. So show me. So that part of technology I love. As a patient experience, I'm speaking from. As digital x-ray, sure. I think it's been around long enough. I think just about everybody's there. I don't go into as many dental offices, but I'm sure we're not seeing any traditional film developers now, if any. We've got to be very few left out there. Remember the old Philips 810 BX model, the smell of fixer and developer in dental practices. Nobody misses that. Yeah. Nobody misses that. Not the dentist, not the staff, not anybody. There's a cost of absorbing any technology. I would say, look at the electric vehicle. Cool, slick, phenomenal, so much discussion. Now I hear some of the big manufacturers are rolling back their EV production because they're not getting the uptake and it's not profitable. And there's all this environmentalists about the battery. So every technology will have a very sexy introduction, probably some kind of maturation, a little bit of resistance and fall off. And then either it's here to stay and it lives on like digital radiography did, or it's going to die out. And I know that your profession has seen a lot of really cool, sexy toys come along that many doctors have bought. And we find a lot of those collecting dust in the basements of some dental practices. So slow down on your technology consumption would be my advice to any dentist. Talk to others who already bought it, the early adapters. They'll give you their story. Usually it's like, well, it was a little while. It was a long learning curve. I think of like the whole 3D CAD CAM technology that came out 25 years ago, I guess. Go slow on technology consumption, but it's here. It's here to stay. Some things will change your profession. Some things are worth the investment, and some things the patients and the staff love the application of it. And if you're impressing your staff, yourself, and your patients, that's probably good technology. If it's just the latest and greatest and no one has any proof that it does anything yet, like make more money or make you a better dentist or make you a faster dentist, I don't know why you'd buy it.
Excellent point of view. Why do new dental associates want to work in major cities and not small towns? It would appear that the pay scale will be higher in small towns. I know, like, for instance, where I live in Truro, it's about 60 kilometers from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Okay. But you think it's so, they all want to live in Halifax. Okay. And I know Halifax is so saturated with dentists and they're not going to make the income that they want to make. I don't know if it's like that to GTA or not, right? But that question's always like I know they have student loans, I know they have a lot of debt, right, and stuff. But when an associate comes in and looks at your office, they say, "Well, it's not the city. I don't want to live here or not." My thinking is, wow, you're going to make good income here. Probably pay your student loan off really fast. But I find it's not like that. Why is it? Why are we in that kind of age right now?
So, this question's been asked for generations. I wrote an article with Dr. Wayne Rayborn. He's the former dean of U of A, Faculty of Dentistry. He's my associate now. He's been with me over 20 years. And, we bantered about this a long time ago. Before he came to work for me, when he was the dean, we co-wrote an article. Canadian Dental Association published it about adequate supply of new graduates and where they're going to want to go. And the answer's the same today as it's been for probably 50 years. I know. Life, family, in-laws, outlaws, museums, theaters, restaurants, culture, the kids. And one thing a lot of people forget is that a dentist typically marries another professional. A lot of dentists are married to another professional. And that could be an accountant, a lawyer, a professional banker, a medical doctor. Like, dentists tend to attract other professions.
Right.
As is true of all the professions for that matter. What are they going to do in Truro? Can they get a job? So we have to think about the spouse, because we typically have two income earners in every household in Canada today, particularly in their 30s. The young professionals, they all want to work. This is their earning cycle. This is when they want to get in and get their teeth in. If they have kids, they've either got in-laws or outlaws or brothers or sisters or daycare. So they want to work. And a lot of people forget that if a young dentist migrates to Tatamagouche, he or she will be busy for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
They'll have a full book from day one. They're probably booked 6-8 weeks out solid already. And you can buy that practice in Tatamagouche for a lot less than you can in Truro, and for less than you certainly can in Halley, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What's your spouse going to do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where are the kids going to go to school? If you have, I always say in-laws and outlaws, but if you have parents, which a lot of these dentists are indirectly or somehow supporting or working with, what are they going to do?
Yeah, that's
and
great.
It's nothing to do with ethnicity and culture anymore. It's about what to do. What is your day going to look like? The dentist will be busy forever, and they'll pay off their student loan faster in Truro than they will in Halley, or they will in North Bay than they will in Toronto. And I could go across the nation and name all the small towns and the big cities. It's the exact same thing coast to coast. My advice to you, young man, young woman, get out of the big cities. Sign up for 2 years, maybe 3. You can always come back. If it's horrible, you can resign, but most principals don't want you to do that. Stick to your promises. If you say you'll stay 2 years, stay 2 years. See what you find out. Many have left the big cities for 2 years and stayed a lifetime.
Wow, that was a nice gem, actually. I never thought of the spouse angle of that whole thing, but that was awesome. Okay, but appreciate your time here today, Tim. You really got me thinking, I'll tell you that, with a lot of the questions that I asked, and really opened my mind to a lot of stuff in dentistry, which I always enjoy. I'm going to leave this last thing with you, and because I know you've seen a lot in your industry and stuff. Dentistry is evolving every day, right? What does the future of dentistry look like to you? Are we going to have more corporate offices? Is the market getting saturated? What do you envision in the future? Okay.
Well, the dental market is already oversaturated. There are far too many providers for the number of Canadians that can uptake dental care.
Okay.
It's been like that for over a decade. That's why we have dental practices that are, struggling for new patients. They're advertising, like I say, $10,000 a month to try to get those new patients. Quite often, those new patients just have to come for another dental practice. So if you get 20 new patients this month, somebody probably lost 20. And then they've got 20 new patients, which means you probably lost some to them. I mean, it's a lot of back and forth new patient flow. It's not like 10,000 new people came to Truro and they all found a new dentist in the last year. It's just not that case. Now, there are some high growth population areas, particularly like I witnessed the other day driving Mississauga Road north of Mississauga proper. Oh my gosh, the new housing. But there's so many dental offices in that area. I don't know how they're all going to split. There's only so many to go around. If you look at population growth and number of dentists obtaining a license growth, and then you have to factor in the exit rate, there's too many dentists coming in, not enough exiting, not enough new population or people with dental needs to match the new dentist license growth. So you're oversaturated. You have been for over a decade, particularly in the larger cities, because we know they don't want to leave for family reasons. So I think the future looks great for the established dental practice that has culture and referrals from existing patients. Okay. So those of you that are great leaders, that have great culture, that the majority of your patients are coming from referral from existing patients, I think your future is very bright. For those that are relying on social media and marketing and locations and signage and free parking and evenings and weekends, which is what all these new dental offices and all these new subdivisions and plazas do, I think it's going to be a very long, painful ride for you. That's the future.
Wow. Listen, Tim, appreciate your time on this podcast. You are my second guest, by the way, so that's awesome. I appreciate a lot.
I got one shameless promotion, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
If any of your viewers want a copy of Profitable Practice, this is my book I wrote. It's now in its 10th edition. It's titled Why a Dental Practice is an Exceptional Investment. If you send a note to Anil, he'll flip it to me. And I just need a name and an address. I recommend your home address because most people don't want to get this book at their office. Staff might think you're up to something. So
I'll tell you what.
Your message is your host of Speakeasy Dental, Dr. McCarr. I'll make sure you get a free copy of the book. I'll personally sign it. Just need your name and address in my office. We'll ship it out. Thank you.
Listen, Tim, keep doing what you're doing. Your knowledge is powerful. It's wonderful in the dental community. I always love this kind of perspective. You have no idea how I love it because you're unbiased, you're open communicator, and you tell it like it is, and that's what I love, right? So thank you very, very much for being on this podcast, Speakeasy Dental, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon. Thank you.
My pleasure to be your second guest on Speakeasy Dental. I know.
Make
it a strong day.
Okay, buddy. Thank you.